Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Risk Modeling Hub. If you are looking to break into credit risk analytics as a data scientist, I've got the perfect roadmap for you. Here, what you will get inside. First, you will master the essential skills and knowledge areas you need. Then you will dive into the statistics and risk modeling, the core of this field. I'll also show you the portfolio projects that actually impress the hiring managers. Plus, I'll prep you through thoroughly for the interviews. Think of this as your complete growth map, everything you need to land that credit risk analytics role. So, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to subscribe. On this channel, I create easy to understand educational content on credit risk modeling, model validation, Basel, IFRS 9, machine learning for risk, Python, SQL, and career guidance for banking and analytics professionals. So, whether you are a beginner starting your journey or a working professional looking to upskill, you will find practical and easy to follow content to help you learn and grow in your career. So, click the subscribe button and press the bell icon so you never miss any update or any videos. So, let's get started. Let's discuss the complete learning roadmap for mastering the risk analytics. I am going to break this down into 5 key areas that you will set up for the success. So, first, let's talk about the core skills. You will build a solid foundation in the technical and domain knowledge, the fundamentals you absolutely need. Next step is the concepts, and here you will learn the critical frameworks like PD, EAD, LGD, and regulations. These are the building blocks of the credit risk. Then we move into the statistics, and this is where the things get technical. You will master the advanced statistical techniques that power the risk models. And the fourth pillar is the projects. Theory is great, but nothing beats hands-on experience. You will build a portfolio of real projects that show employers what you can do. And finally, the interview preparation. So basically, I'll coach you on the questions that you will face and strategies to answer them like a pro. These 5 key areas work together to create your complete learning journey. So master each one and you will be ready for a career in credit risk analytics. Now let's start with the foundation. So basically, what exactly is credit risk? It is the probability that a borrower will default on their loan obligations. Simple as that. But here, what makes it important? As a credit risk professional, you need to understand and quantify 3 key critical components. The first pillar is the probability of default or PD. This answers the questions: what's the likelihood that a borrower won't pay back their loan? The second is the exposure at default or EAD. This is pretty straightforward. How much money does the bank have outstanding when the borrower defaults? And the third is the loss given default or LGD. This tells us if a default happens, how much of that exposure will actually lose. And here why this matters. These 3 components impacts billions in capital decisions. Banks use them every single day to decide who gets a loan, how much they can borrow and what interest rate they pay. When you master these 3 components, you are shaping the numbers behind every loan. And that's the power of understanding the credit risk. So, credit risk has undergone a massive transformation that we have discussed before. Let me show you here how. The old way, the traditional approach. So basically, before 2000s, credit decisions were all about the judgment. A credit officer would manually review your application based on their experience and intuition. But here's the problem. The process was slow, inconsistent, and limited. They could only look at a handful of variables, and 2 different officers might evaluate the same borrower differently. Fast forward to today, now we use the statistical models powered by the data. And here's what changed. Instead of manual reviews, we have automated the analysis. Instead of gut feelings, we have data-driven decisions. Instead of waiting days for the approval, we get real-time processing. And instead of the inconsistency, we have consistent objective evaluations. Plus, we can now analyze the hundreds of variables simultaneously. So what's the results if we have done that? Basically, there are 3 massive benefits. First, it's faster. Decisions that took weeks now happen in minutes. Second, it's more objective. No more bias or inconsistency. Third, we get the higher accuracy as we are making better lending decisions. And that's the evolution of credit risk, from human judgment to intelligent data science. Now, if you want to work in credit risk, you need to understand the regulatory landscape. It's constantly evolving and it directly impacts how banks operate. Let's look at the 3 key frameworks. First, the Basel III, the foundation. Established after the 2008 financial crisis, Basel III is the current standard. It focuses on the capital adequacy, the risk-weighted assets, and the maintaining strong capital tiers. Banks follow this today to ensure that they have enough capital to absorb the losses. Second is the IFRS 9, the accounting standard. Mandatory since 2018, IFRS 9 changed how banks account for credit losses. Instead of waiting for defaults to happen, banks now estimate expected credit losses upfront. It introduced a stage-based approach that better reflects real credit risk earlier. Third, the Basel III Endgame, the future. Coming soon in 2027, this framework brings enhanced standards and stricter requirements. It's still being finalized, but it's on the horizon. And here's the key takeaway. Regulatory knowledge equals the professional credibility. Understanding these frameworks isn't just nice to know, it's essential. Employers expect the credit risk professionals to navigate this landscape confidently. So, you need to stay ahead of the curve by mastering these regulations. Now we are getting into the technical side of credit risk, and this is where the data science meets the lending decisions. Let's break down the 4 core statistical skills you need. First, the logistic regression. This is the industry standard for building the PD models. So, don't use the random forest or XGBoost here at the start. Logistic regression is what banks rely on because it's interpretable and regulatory approved. Second is the survival analysis. This is crucial for calculating the lifetime PD, which is required by IFRS 9. It helps you understand how default risk changes over time. Third is the hypothesis testing. You need to understand the statistical significance and p-values, and this ensures your findings are real and not just noise in the data. Fourth is the model validation matrix, and this is critical. You will use the AUC Gini KS statistics to measure the discrimination, how well your model separates the good borrowers from the bad ones, and you will measure the calibration, whether your predicted default rate matches what actually happens. So basically, discrimination tells you if your model can tell good from the bad. Calibration tells you if your predictions are accurate, and both matter equally. So you need to master these 4 skills, and you have got the statistical foundation every credit risk professional needs. Now here's a reality check. In credit risk, you will spend a lot of time working with the data, and that means SQL is non-negotiable. Let me show you the 3 core components the SQL needs that you need to master. First is the complex joins. You will work with the multiple tables constantly: customer data, transaction history, account information, etc. And you need to be comfortable matching keys and navigating the relationships across different schemas. And this is foundational. Second is the financial data queries. Credit risk isn't just about generic data. You need to know how to extract the relevant fields from the raw banking data and apply the business rules. Understanding how the financial data is structured in banks is essential. Third is the data quality management. The real world data is messy, and you will encounter the missing values, duplicates, inconsistencies, and errors. You need to validate the data and handle the transformations before you even think about modeling. So you need to look at how bank risk modelers actually spend their time. Basically, the 40% goes to data preparation and only 35% on the model development, approx 15% on the validation, and rest 10% on the documentation. And this tells you something important. SQL mastery equals the 40% of your work efficiency. So you can't build great models with bad data. So master the SQL first, and everything else becomes easier. Now let's talk about the programming languages you need to master for credit risk. The landscape has 4 main players, and understanding each one is crucial. First is the SAS, the industry standard. 90% of the banks still use SAS. It's deeply integrated with the databases and mainframe systems, which is where the banking infrastructure lives. SAS is exceptional at model validation. If you want to work in traditional banking, SAS is non-negotiable. It scores a perfect of 5 out of 5. Second is the Python, the rising star nowadays. Banks are actively building libraries in Python because it's flexible and has incredible machine learning capabilities. Python is gaining ground fast, and it scores approx 4.5 out of 5 because it's very useful. Third is the SQL, the essential foundation. Without a doubt, it scores 5 out of 5 and absolutely non-negotiable. You will use SQL every single day to extract and manipulate the data from the SQL server and the relational databases. Fourth is the R, the language, the growing adoption. This is used, but it's less common than Python in banking right now. And hence I score it 3.5 out of 5 as a secondary choice. So start with SAS or Python, I would recommend, and then add the SQL. And master those two plus the SQL, and you are in the competitive market. Now, you can be a brilliant data scientist, but if you don't understand the banking, you will struggle in credit risk. Domain knowledge is but separate the amateurs from the professionals. So let's break down the financial mastery into the 5 key areas. First, the 5 C's. Every banker evaluates the borrowers using the character, capacity, capital, collateral, and conditions. Understanding these 5 dimensions is foundational to how the lending decisions are made. Second is the financial analysis. You need to read and interpret the balance sheets, income statements, and cash flow statements. Banks live and breathe these documents. If you can't analyze the financial statements, you can't assess the borrower's health. Third, the key ratios. Debt to equity, EBITDA, interest coverage, DSCR, these ratios tell the stories of a borrower's financial strength. You need to know what they mean and why they matter. Fourth is the loan types. Mortgages, corporate loans, credit cards, auto loans, each has different risk profiles. Understanding how different loan products work is essential. And final, the fifth one is the collateral and recovery. If a borrower defaults, basically what's the collateral worth? And how quickly can you recover it? And this directly impacts the loss given default LGD. So domain knowledge beats the technical skills. Banks prioritize the understanding business context over pure coding ability. So you need to master the business and your technical skills become truly powerful. And here's something most people miss. Technical skills alone won't make you great. Soft skills are what separates the good analyst from the exceptional ones. First, you need to be good at the problem solving, as the real world data is messy and you will face the data quality issues, model instability, and business constraints. Great analysts don't just build the models, they solve the problems creatively. They know how to navigate the complexity. Second is the communication. This is huge, as you need to explain the complex statistical concepts to non-technical stakeholders. You will prepare the regulatory presentations and justify your model assumptions to senior management. So if you can't communicate clearly, your insights stay buried in your spreadsheets. Next is the commercial awareness. Understanding the economic cycles, macroeconomic factors, and the market trends matters. Credit risk doesn't exist in vacuum. Great analysts understand the business context behind the numbers. And last is the ethical conduct. Regulatory compliance, fair lending practices, and data privacy. These aren't optional. They are fundamental. You are making decisions that affect the people's lives. Ethics matter deeply. So basically 50% of the credit risk roles are won through soft skills and not just the technical knowledge. You can learn Python or SAS, but soft skills separates the competitive candidates from the ones who actually lead. So you need to invest in both and you can be unstoppable. Now let's dive into the first pillar of credit risk, the probability of default or PD. So it's the likelihood that a borrower will default within a specific time frame, usually 12 months, and is expressed as a percentage ranging from 0% meaning the no risk to 100% meaning certain default. So let's understand this from a simple example. So if a PD is 3%, that means that 100 similar borrowers, out of that we expect 3 of them to default. Now there are 2 types of PD you need to understand. First is the point in time PD or PIT. This reflects the current economic conditions right now. It moves with the economic cycle, going up during the recessions and going down during the booms. PIT is what IFRS 9 requires, and it's responsive to market changes. Second is the TTC1, the through the cycle PD. This averages the PD across entire economic cycles, good times and bad times. TTC is more stable and is what Basel III requires, and it gives you the long run average. You can understand the work example that is given in the below. So basically, understanding these distinctions is critical, and PD is the foundation of everything else in the credit risk. Now let's talk about the second pillar of credit risk, the exposure at default or EAD. It is straightforward. It's the amount of money a borrower owes at the bank they default, and it's the outstanding balance when the default actually happens. So EAD has basically two components. First is the current drawn amount. This is the money that borrower has already borrowed and is using. For example, if someone has a loan outstanding of 70,000, that their current drawn amount. Second component is the undrawn credit lines. For revolving credit like credit cards, this includes the available credit the borrower hasn't used yet. So if a borrower has, let's say, 10,000 in available credit on their card, that count towards the EAD because they could draw it before defaulting. Let's quickly go through the example. A customer has, let's say, 70,000 loan outstanding and 10,000 in the available credit. This makes the total EAD to 80,000, the full amount the bank is exposed to if they default. So this the one special concept is the downturn EAD. This is the maximum expected exposure during the economic stress periods, and Basel III requires banks to use the downturn EAD in their calculations because borrowers tend to draw more credit right before the default. That is why EAD is all about understanding your total exposure. You need to know your numbers. Now we arrive at the third and the final pillar, the loss given default or LGD. And this is what you will actually lose. The LGD equals to the exposure at default minus what you recover minus your cost, all divided by the original exposure. Let us understand this through an example. Imagine a borrower defaults with an exposure of 1 lakhs and you sell their collateral and recover 60,000 from it. But the process cost you 5,000 in legal fees, administration and foreclosure expenses. Your actual loss is 1 lakh minus 60,000 minus 5,000, which equals to 35,000. This got divided by the original exposure, which is the 1 lakhs, and that will give you your LGD, which is 35%. So LGD has three components: the exposure at default, the recovery value, and the cost. And better the collateral and higher recovery rates lower your LGD, which means the lower expected losses. And this is why the secured loans are less risky than the unsecured ones. So you need to master all these three components to understand the entire framework of the credit risk. Now comes to our master equation that ties everything together, the expected loss, which is equal to PD times LGD times EAD. Banks use this formula to determine the capital requirements, set the loan pricing, and manage the portfolio risk. If expected loss is high, you charge higher interest rates or require more capital. If it's low, you can price the loan more competitively. So this single equation is the foundation of the modern credit risk management. You need to understand it thoroughly. Now let's talk about how the regulators ensures the banks don't blow up. And this is where the Basel III comes in. This is all about the capital adequacy, making sure the banks have enough money to absorb the losses. Now let's break it down. The PD requirement. Basel requires the banks to use the TTC PD and not the point in time, because TTC is stable across the economic cycles. It doesn't overreact to temporary market swings, and this makes the capital requirements more consistent. Next is the LGD and the EAD requirement, because the regulators want you to use the downturn LGD and EAD, which is estimated during the economic stress periods. Do you know why? This is because the borrowers draw more credit and collateral values that drops during the recessions. Using the downturn estimates ensures you are prepared for the worst. Third is the three approaches. Banks can use the standardized approach for simplicity, foundation IRB for moderate sophistication, or advanced IRB for the complex operations. And different banks chose based on their size and the capability. Last one is the capital conservation. On top of the minimum requirements, banks must hold a 2.5% of the common equity buffer for the extra stability. So Basel III focuses on the stability and capital adequacy. The goal is building a resilient banking system through stronger capital and the risk conservative estimates. This framework protects the depositors and the financial systems as a whole. Now there comes the IFRS 9. which is fundamentally change how the banks account for the credit losses. That is, instead of waiting for defaults to happen, banks now recognize the losses upfront. Like discussed, the old incurred model only recognized losses after they have happened, and the IFRS 9 replaced that with the expected loss model, which recognizes the losses before they occur. So, the IFRS 9 uses a three-stage framework. The initial recognition, that is when your loan originates and it starts from here. And here you calculate a 12-month loss allowance for low risk. New loans and normal assets live in this stage. Next stage is the credit deterioration. If credit quality declines significantly or payment difficulties emerge, the loan moves to stage 2. And now you calculate the lifetime loss allowance, accounting for the remaining life of the loan. Next is the stage 3. The last one is the default stage. When you have objective evidence of impairment or the borrower is more than 90 days past due, you move to stage 3, and here you recognize the full lifetime loss allowance. So you need a 12-month PD for stage 1, lifetime PD for stage 2 and 3, plus LGD and AAD across all the stages. So, like discussed, IFRS 9 has been mandatory since 2018, and it forces the banks to be more proactive about the recognizing credit risk earlier, creating a more resilient financial system. Now let's discuss the Basel III, the end game. And if you want to work in credit risk, you need to understand the timeline. So first is the phase 1, the reproposal stage in the March 19 to 2026. Federal regulators just issued a revised Basel III endgame proposal, and this proposal basically streamlines the risk-based capital framework and adjusts the surcharge. The key point is that it's a capital neutral proposal, meaning that they are redesigning the framework without drastically changing the overall capital requirements. Phase 2 is the finalization stage in the late 2026. After the reproposal, there's a 90-day public comment period where banks, industry groups, and stakeholders they will provide the feedback. Phase 3 is the rollout stage in 2027 to 2028, and this is the implementation phase. Large banking institutions will transition gradually with the staggered effective dates and reporting requirements. So basically, banks are actively reviewing the regulatory details and revising their models in the anticipation of the rollout. So if you are entering the credit risk now, you are entering during a transformational period, and understanding this will give you a competitive edge. Now let's talk about your first portfolio project, building a probability of default model. And this is a beginner level project that will take around 3 to 4 weeks as per your speed. You need to build an industry standard logistic regression model that predicts whether a borrower will default. And this is exactly what banks do. They will start with a data preparation. You can start with any of the data sets like from the UCI dataset or the lending club dataset. That will work great. Then you get understand with the data preparation part and then move on to the model development stage where you will build your model, the logistic regression one, and you will split your data into the training and validation sets. And then you will optimize the parameters. Then comes the validation in the metric stage where you will calculate the AUC and ROC curve analysis, do the Gini coefficient calculation, and the KS statistic for the discrimination one. Last stage comes up the interpretation one, where you analyze the feature importance and explain and documents your insights. And this stage is critical as you need to communicate why your model matters. You should also prepare a GitHub submission checklist where you have clean and well commented code as comprehensive readme, a data dictionary, a model documentation, and performance visualization. Everything is important. This project demonstrates that you understand the statistical fundamentals, can code, can explain clearly, and employers love seeing this on your portfolio. Now we are moving to an intermediate level project, building a credit scoring scorecard. This takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and if banks actually use 4 to 5 weeks depends upon if you are a very absolute beginner, but if you have a little experience, 2 to 3 weeks will work. Here you will create a practical application scorecard that banks use to make the real lending decisions. And this bridges the gap between the statistical models and the business operations. You will implement all the steps, and if you are done, then you are bridging the gap between the statistical theory and the real banking operations. So for this, you need to have a clear understanding of the WA transformation, how scorecard is being developed, not just model fitting, You need to have a theoretical explanation and proper justification regarding your results. You need to calculate the performance analysis through the charts as well as through the calculations. And there must be a proper implementation guide where you need to document your scorecard logic, explain your cutoff score determination, and also you need to create the business rule documentation so non-technical terms can also use your model. So all these steps are important. Now welcome to the advanced project, building a complete IFRS 9 expected credit loss model. And this is what the modern banks use for the accounting. So the objective is that you need to build a complete IFRS 9 ECL model with 12-month and the lifetime PD across all the stages. So you need to divide your portfolio into the meaningful segments, basically the mortgages, corporate loans, credit cards, and then classify it by the risk rating. Analyze the customer aging, and different products have different risk profiles, so you need to segment accordingly. Then comes the PD modeling part, the LGD and the EAD estimation, and then the ECL calculation scenarios. So you need to show how the model changes under the different economic scenarios, and the ECL by stage and the impact on provisioning is what you need to deliver. Also, the scenario analysis should be included in your report. So this is important as IFRS 9 is the current accounting standard, and the detailed knowledge is highly valued by the banks. Now comes the very advanced project, the capstone project, the stress testing. It shows your understanding related to the regulatory requirements at the highest level. So you need to build a complete stress testing framework that shows how the portfolio performs under the different economic scenarios. And this is what the regulators demand from the banks. You need to run the 3 scenarios, the base case, the moderate case, and the severe case, where each of the macroeconomic scenarios will behave differently, and because of that the PD will behave differently. You need to create a scenario variable table where you will see how the GDP, unemployment, and the other variables are behaving in each of the scenarios. And the output from this would be the portfolio ECL under each scenario, the capital requirement impact, the sensitivity analysis showing which variables matter the most, the risk heat maps, visualization of the portfolio exposure. This is important from the regulator's perspective. So banks must demonstrate that they can survive the severe economic stress, and regulators require this with proper justification. This project, if you build that, will show you that you understand the regulatory requirements and macro micro linkages as well, and is highly impressive to the risk teams. Now comes the GitHub repository. The hiring managers will spend a bit of time reviewing your project so that they can understand what kind of work that you have done. So first, your code should be well commented. It should have a comprehensive README file. There should be a data dictionary defining each and every variable, meaning its type, its range, and its unit. The model documentation should be clean. You should explain the assumptions, limitations, and the validation results, and you should clearly articulate the readers through your thinking process. Next is the before and after comparisons. There should not be a one straight model. You need to show the improvements on your stages. Also, the raw data versus the processed data, the model performance. Every nitty-gritty you need to explain. Clear visualization should be there as the storytelling matters. You need to make your insights easy to understand. So, organize the repository locally, separate folders for datasets, notebooks, and scripts, results, and documentation. Clean structure signals the professionalism. Hiring manager will spend time reviewing your projects if they found interesting. So your documentation and presentation determine the first impression. So you should count that. Now let's talk about the statistical methods that power the credit risk modeling. And there are the modeling techniques and validation techniques that you need both. So for the model development, you need, as discussed, the logistic regression part, the tree-based models, the survival analysis, and the Markov chain modeling. But for the model validation, you should have a clear understanding regarding the metrics that being used under the discrimination, the calibration, and the stability. These are the very important questions that can come up, not just for the definitions, but how you can connect one metric with the other. Also, understanding the financial ratios is essential for credit analysis. So I leave up to you to understand these metrics, these ratios, and clarity over that will help you to crack the interviews. Then comes the interview questions. You should have a clear understanding regarding the 5 C's of the credit that we have discussed. You should be clearly able to explain the PD, LGD, and EAD, the ECL components, and how they basically relate to each other. Also, the understanding of the regulatory guidelines, the capital pricing, the laws, the provisions, everything you need to understand regarding these regulations. Also, building if you have built a model from scratch, then you should be able to walk through each and steps. Also, your thought process and what exactly goes into building the model, you should be able to articulate. There are few other questions as well from the practical banking perspective. I leave up to you. I have accumulated all these questions. So just give a glance, pause the video, give a glance, and you can be able to understand. If you have any doubt, you can drop me in the comments and I'll able to address that. There are few scenario based questions as well. These are some of the case study questions, like the interviewer can ask you, walk me through approving or rejecting a loan application. So here you should have a structured approach regarding the how you collect the statements, how you run the model, and how you check the financial ratios. Then you need to set the loan conditions, document your rationale, and then you follow a systematic process. So basically, these scenario based questions understand your thinking and mental ability. Like, how, do you have conceptual clarity of each and every technical terms, or basically have you memorized it only? So that's why these case study questions are important. Like, suppose an interviewer asks you, how would the macroeconomic stress affect your models? So there you need to have a clear understanding of the recession, the unemployment, the point in time PD, the macroeconomic part. You should have the capital reserves as well. You should have an understanding of each and every key terms, and then we should be able to connect the dots. So in this case, basically in the round two, probably the interviewer tests your thinking ability, right? So, problem decomposition, business awareness, regulatory knowledge, and practical solutions is what can make you set apart from the other candidates. Already have data science, so you already have machine learning mindset, model validation expertise, and you have engineering skills as well. And most importantly, the programming efficiency, as you do get questions regarding the puzzles or so to solve. So that would be your data science advantage. You need to keep practice so that you can get a hands on and you don't forget what in the meantime you are doing. So banks want stable and interpretable models. You need to show that you respect their domain requirements and not just technical part. So you are not a beginner here, but you are bringing your machine learning rigor and coding excellence to the credit risk part. Some of the common mistakes that you need to avoid, like overselling the machine learning, not understanding why the logistic regression beats the tree models, ignoring the regulatory landscape, ignoring the business context. These are some of the things that you should avoid while in the interview, right? Don't be over smart. As great candidates, they come with the business judgment and the statistical and the regulatory compliance. Basically, they need a package who understands everything and who can put their thoughts into the business context. So the interview preparation strategy should be that for the week one, you should spend your time on the foundational knowledge. You should start by studying the 5 C's deeply and memorize their definitions and the formulas, but try to understand it through the examples. Next comes the conceptual mastery stage, the week two, where you would practice explaining the concepts without the jargon. So, for this, you can create the flashcards for the regulatory definitions and solve some interview questions and record yourself while answering so that you can listen and refine what are you saying. Then you need to do the bank specific research, like researching your target's bank credit risk approach, or you can study their annual reports and regulatory filings to understand their models and exposures. Also, you can connect with the risk leaders on the LinkedIn and understand their backgrounds. Last stage comes at the project and the mock interview stage, where you need to prepare at least 3 to 4 project stories from the portfolio and have a version so that you can walk through them in a detailed way and prepare wisely. So basically, this preparation, if you are preparing wisely, it will beat your talent, as talent doesn't prepare you thoroughly, but preparation at a slow and a medium pace will set you apart. So you need to invest time thoroughly and honestly. Now let's discuss the roadmap. So month one, you need to give time to the foundations that we have discussed. Then comes the domain and the regulatory knowledge, which sets you at the 50% of the progress, where you will be studying the financial statements and the ratios, also the regulatory guidance. Then comes the advanced concepts, where you master the sophisticated techniques and building the models and basically building a portfolio that you can showcase at the time of the interview. Then the integration and the interview readiness. At this stage in the month 4, you need to complete all the projects that you have started and polish them on the GitHub. You need to get started with researching the target banks and their credit risk leaders. So complete all the projects wisely and build your GitHub projects that will give you the interview confidence. Now let me point out to the actual resources that can help you accelerate while learning. You can go through Coursera, which will help you to understand the credit risk modeling portion. Also, the Listen Data blogs, you can go, this is free and it's comprehensive and fundamental. The regulatory guidance can be from the Basel Committee. They publishes the official documents at the bis.org. IFRS also has free summaries and the guidance. You can also refer the consultancy Big Four papers, the free IFRS 9 documents. Also, you can focus bit on certification if your budget permits, like the CICM, which is the Chartered Institute of Credit Management certification globally, the FRM1, which is popular, also the professional associations, the networking and the resources that will help you build. The question should come up to you that are these certification worth it? So basically, the FRM certification is quite popular in our risk area. This is offered by GAB and covers the broad financial risk management. It is best for the broader risk careers or the senior roles, and it's well regarded, but it takes a significant time and dedication. The CICM certification is highly specific to credit. Here you will learn the credit analysis, credit risk management, portfolio management, and the corporate finance. So basically, this is best for the credit specialist and can be more targeted. The last can be the portfolio based approach, which is my recommendation. That is, you need to build your portfolio first by creating the four complete credit risk projects on the GitHub with the documentation. And this will take ample amount of time, but if done regularly and rigorously, honestly, you can have a clear understanding regarding the models. And it will impact your career in a very positive way. Now you have everything that you need to transform into the credit risk, and so that you can start with the learning roadmap this month, like beginning immediately, like from month 1 you get started with the foundations, and then get started with building a project parallelly. Once you have a bit of hands-on, then you study the regulatory frameworks in depth and also connect with the credit risk professionals on the LinkedIn. You can also refer to the notes and the materials, the videos that I publish weekly on my channel. You can refer to that as well. They are very deep and they requires your dedication to watch them. And if you have any doubts, you can drop them in the comments as well. That's a free resource for you. I'm doing a very hard work for that. Right? Regarding the interview preparation, you need to project the stories in a very good way that shows your clarity regarding the conceptual terms. Now, before you go, I would like you to like this video, as your support helps me reach more data scientists transitioning into the credit risk. Every like tells you that you found this valuable, and others will see more content like this. As my new contents drop every week on credit risk modeling and career development, you will get fresh insights on what's happening in the industry and the practical modeling techniques. Now comment below, tell me what topics matter to you, and should I cover the stress testing or any other particular topic in detail. Your feedback is what that I will create next. From my side, I will be diving deep into the SR 11.7 model risk management guidance in the upcoming videos, and I will show how bank converts the customer attributes into the model inputs. We will be comparing the dummy variables into credit risk modeling and much more of the things that are coming up. So follow @Risk Modeling Hub on YouTube for credit risk insights. And thank you for investing your time in for your career today. You have everything you need to make this transition successfully. Your data science skills are valuable. Your curiosity is your strength. Your commitment will determine your success. So focus on your domain knowledge first. Build some portfolio projects and achieve your goal in credit risk. I know that you have got this, and let's build our future in the credit risk. Subscribe to my channel for more insights. See you in the next one. Thank you.